Hey everybody, DJ here, and this is going to be the next part in the Octane render series for Blender. We're going to talk about getting started with the engine. Now before we begin, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. And if you ever get lost or you need some questions answered or anything like that, you can jump on the Discord server. The link is below in the video description. And if you like the content and you would like to support the channel, please take a moment to click on the link below to the Patreon. And if you'd like to become a patron, there are some benefits for you. You can check it out there. Now let's go ahead and start here and make sure that you have turned on your Octane server because, like I said in the previous downloaded installation, you do need to be linked up to the internet and use this to connect. Then open up the Blender Octane version. And we're just going to start here with just a fresh file. Click off here. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to go over all the basics you really need to know before you start doing stuff in here. And I'm doing this one first, whereas normally in other crash courses and stuff for other render engines, I will usually go through a lot of like separate items like materials and things like that. But I want to do this one first just so that you guys all know how to set up your files according to what you're probably used to inside of Blender. There's a lot of things that Blender users who use cycles and even LuxCore or ProRender are used to, and Octane is kind of its own animal. And there's a lot of things that you're sort of expected to know before you really start using this engine. So I want to take a moment here and make sure that everybody knows how to set up their files before they really start doing the sessions that I'm going to be teaching you in how to do materials and everything else. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to turn on the Octane engine. So go over to your render properties over here, and you should be able to choose Octane from there. The next thing that you'll want to do is make sure that you have your render devices turned on. So if you scroll down the list here on the right, you should see down below where it says Octane Server right here, this little drop down. If you go below that, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Click on Device Preferences, and you'll have a listing that's like this, and you'll be able to turn them on from here. So you should be able to see your graphics cards right here, able to be turned on, and make sure that it's selected. If you have the free version, you can only use one right now. That is just how it is. And you can see that I also have RTX acceleration at the bottom here because I do have an RTX 3090, as you can see right there. So you may or may not see this. And if you have an NVIDIA card, you should be able to choose at least one of your devices from this list. So let's go ahead and close that out. And before we begin doing anything else here, we're just going to do a couple things. I'm going to take this light because we don't really need this. We're going to delete that. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a floor plane here. We're going to add a couple really brief or short, easy materials to some of these. And you'll see really quickly what I mean by this engine is a little bit more advanced than some of the other ones, even LuxCore or ProRender or any of those other ones that you might be used to. So let's go ahead and hit 1 here. And I'm not going to turn on my keys because these are really, this engine is more for intermediate and advanced users. So you should know some of these hotkeys. I will be saying what I'm doing, but you probably won't see the keyboard in the bottom left as you normally would see. And you're not going to see the screencast keys just because this really should be geared towards the more advanced and intermediate users. So we're just going to grab this on Z, move it up. I'm holding control to lock it, and we're going to add a little ground plane here. So go up and we'll choose plane, and I'm just going to scale this up to be about that large and apply that scale. So if we go ahead and turn on the rendered view, and I'm just going to minimize a couple of these here, and we turn on the rendered view, you can see that it looks like this. It's pretty bright and there's a lot of stuff going on. And pretty much how this works is the world settings has some stuff in here. So you can see that there's the sky turbidity, there's the power, sky color, so you can change a lot of these items here to sort of change how this is sort of looking. And if you wanted to use this, that's totally fine. I do not recommend using this sort of method to light your scene. But basically, you can mess with some of these for the overall lighting if you'd like to just change a couple things. But what we're going to do first is we're going to go over here and we're going to change this to texture environment right here. Okay. And it starts off with just a white color. If you left click this, we can go up to image texture right here. So image texture. And it's going to automatically set this, and it's probably better to do this in solid mode while we're doing this. It's automatically going to set a couple things, 16-bit float. You may or may not know what that means. That's fine. And then wrap around. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to click this open button, and I'm using HDRIs that are from HDRI Haven. The link is down below in the video description, so you can go ahead and download one of these if you'd like. And we're just going to pick one of these. I'll pick the one I normally do, which is the Studio Small right here. And there's some settings down here that will be important in a moment, so let's just leave it as is, and then we'll look at this in the rendered view. And you may be going, wow, this is, really bright. What the heck's going on? And basically, what you're seeing here is how the color space of the engine is communicating with our image that we put in here. So what we want to do is we want to actually take this gamma right here, take this down to a 1. Okay, and that's going to give us something more akin to what we're used to seeing. So this engine kind of requires you to know a little bit more about color math and how color math is sort of represented with your images and with the engine than others. So I would say that the progression of the difficulty of render engines probably starts around maybe Eevee would be more for like the simple engine, although it can be quite complex. Cycles, for the same reason, it can be quite complex, but there's a lot of things that are very simplified. Then LuxCore, because it does start to take into account the power and gamma settings for your images, like your HDRIs or your image textures. And the color space, as you can see right here, this says linear space. So that's a particular type of color space. And you have all sorts of other things that we'll go into in a minute. So let's go ahead and start putting some materials on these. So if we go over here and we split the panel just like normal, go here to the shader editor and hit 0 to look through our camera. I'm actually going to center this a little bit more. So go to view, camera to view, and we're just going to move this up here. Yeah, this is not as cool as like a super cool logo or a character or something like that, but this is going to suffice just fine to show you some of the things that you really need to know before you start really getting into this render engine. So let's go to the rendered view here, and we're going to go over here to the output properties, and we're going to select render region right here. So now we have this section. We're going to remove the show overlays so we could just see this. You can see that we already have some super cool stuff going on here. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. And let's select the cube. You can turn this on if you need to. So we have the cube selected here. And you can see it already has the principled BSDF, which does nothing. So we want to delete that. And we want to hit Shift-A to add, and you'll see there's all of this new stuff here. So I'm going to try my best to keep this as simple as possible. So we're going to go to Octane Shader. Then we're going to go down here to Metal Material. And I'm going to take this and plug it right into the surface. You can see we already have a metallic surface happening. And right down here, you can see there's a little checkbox for smooth. So that will make it flat right there. Or you can click this to make it smooth like this. We can keep it as smooth for now. And to change the color, this engine is a little bit weird with this metallic material, and it's not very clear, but basically this specular right here is where you want to put in some color information. So we're going to hit Shift-A, we're going to go to Octane Texture, we're going to go to RGB Spectrum Texture right here. Change this to whatever you want. I'm going to pick a orange for a specific reason. We're going to put that right into the specular, and you can see that now we have a new color. And you can change the roughness and all this if you want, but let's not get too far into that because it's going to be a little bit tricky. So very, very simply, just get that metal material, pipe it into the surface here, get this RGB spectrum texture, change it to a color, and put that into the specular input right there. So let's go ahead and choose the floor now. We're going to go over here to the Materials tab. We're going to click New. And we are going to see that when we do that, there is a universal material that shows up. So this is the Uber node for this engine. So normally you would see if you had the principled BSDF, it's basically the same idea, but a lot less robust. This has so many things going on in it that it really is daunting to first take a look at. So let's just change a couple things here. So we're going to go over here to where it says albedo color, and albedo is basically the diffuse color. So if we bring this out a little bit, you can see what that is. So right here, albedo color, let's change this to a blue. Maybe something like this. Maybe we can make it a little bit darker. Maybe something like that. Okay. And we're just going to leave this as is. I'm going to go back to my metal material and maybe brighten this up a little bit more because it is a little bit dark. Um, I'll just add a little bit of roughness or something just to make it kind of stick out a little bit more. So here is what you might want to consider rendering. Okay, so let's just say that this is done. This is a completed project. You're ready to render. So let's go ahead and render. So first of all, you cannot render the image if this viewport is on. So if you go up here to render image, it's actually going to tell you viewport shading is active. Only one active render task is supported at the same time. So change this to diffuse or wireframe, whatever you want. Render out the image, either going up here or hitting F12. And now you have this. And you're like, uh-oh, what happened? Okay. So if you don't know what I'm talking about and you don't see it, this is what the problem is. So let's go over here, change this to rendered, and then go over here and take a look at this. There's a very, very big difference between these two images. And this is going to drive you nuts because you won't know what's going on. And if you are a standard Blender user, you're going to be at a loss. You will not know what the problem is. And you're probably going to go online and you're going to do Google searches and try to understand what the heck happened. Why is my render output not matching? And there's going to be stuff that probably makes no sense to you. So I'm going to show you how to resolve this very, very easily. And this is particularly geared towards Blender users who don't often, and I don't mean to be mean about this because I'm exactly the same way. We often don't know a lot about color space and all that kind of stuff. So here's what you need to do. First of all, this viewport right here, if we go to our render properties and you go to color management, this is kind of like controlling the color space transform. It is controlling the color space transform of our viewport render. Okay. So if you change this to standard, that's what it looks like. And if you change this to filmic, which is what most of you are used to, that's what that looks like. Okay. And if you change the lookup table to medium contrast or something like that, it's basically adding some color space information to your scene. It's grading your footage, okay? So if we change this back to, let's say instead of filmic, we go to standard. And instead of this very high contrast, we go to none, okay? This is sort of what it currently looks like. And you may want to adjust a couple things from here. So let's say you take the power here, you put it down to a 0.5 or maybe a 0.25 for your world setting, just because it seems a little crazy. And if you want to adjust the gamma or anything like that, you could do it from here. But let's just say that we want this to be a 0.5. Let's change this a little bit, maybe make this a little bit darker or something. Maybe just change the color a little bit. Maybe take this here and bring this down a little bit. Maybe something like that. Now, if you just do this, okay, and we take a look at our renderer here, this actually changed. And I couldn't show you because it was on the other screen. But basically, this was changing as we do this. So if let's actually do something like this, okay? Let's go like this. I'll keep this kind of over here. And over here, let's bring this out. Come on. Let's go to the properties here, and then let's just change this. Okay, so lookup table, high contrast. You see both of them changed, okay? And if we go here to none, both of them are changing, okay? Hopefully you can see that over there. So if I take the exposure and I turn this up, it blows it out, okay? If I take the gamma here and I bring this down, you can see that both are being adjusted. Cool. So we understand that that's what's going on, but this still is different than this. And that's because you need to go to your camera and you need to go to the camera settings and then go down this list here. And what you need to look for right here, Octane Camera Imager Render Mode. Click that, and now basically what's going to happen is everything that's going to be in your final render, everything that's going to be in your render here is going to match here, okay? So now that that's on, let's go back to the properties here. And for the color management, we're going to keep it as filmic. So let's just throw filmic on here. And the lookup table, we're just going to leave that as none. But the other thing that we can do is if we go to the camera settings here, let's bring this back out, and we go down the list below that area. So you see right here, response type. It says linear off. This is a bunch of color, like film color lookup tables for you, okay? So when you click on these, this will actually set a filmic type of color space. Well, there's a color space that's applied, but this is also a lookup table. So it's taking the values that's there and it's changing it to match a certain kind of film. And these are pretty standard filmic or film type LUTs that you can just pick from that are on this list here. Now, often what people will do when they're doing this professionally, there will already be, and if we change this to sRGB, that's kind of the standard that we would kind of want to do here. So linear off would be sort of like this, and you have this sort of banding here. sRGB, let's just leave this on because this is what people are used to. Professionally, there would usually be a way that you're told to render this stuff out. Either it's, a raw format and then you set some of these up in here for your visual space, your visual color space, sort of like how you do things in Natron or Nuke. There's usually a sort of like viewer film color space, a viewer color space that you use so that you can look at it correctly. But when you render it out, it's probably going to be something like a raw data, or it will be linear, or something like that. You'll usually be given what those are, and then they will take that footage and they will color that afterwards. So there's a view space or a viewer color space, and then when you render it out to be composited into your finals or to be graded or whatever it is that's happening to your image or your animation in post, that is going to be handled later. Okay. So hopefully this makes some kind of sense to you. But for those of you who are Blender users who just want to render out an image and just have it match and be the same, which is what most of the people on my channel, I would imagine, want to know how to do, you basically want to set these things like I showed you here. You want to make sure that you check this on that says Octane Camera Imager Render Mode. And then underneath here, you could just leave this on response gamma LUT. You could play with these if you want and do a Google search for what all of these mean. I really don't want to go into all these. But then the response type here, you can choose a film LUT, which will color your image, and you won't have a whole lot of control over it until the compositing stage. Or if you want to just leave it standard without having to deal with a lot of stuff, put it on sRGB, which is what people are usually used to. And then you can go over to your render settings here, your color management, and you can set this back to standard or filmic or whatever it is that works for you. So you can see here display device is sRGB and our view transform here is filmic. And if we render this now, so if we render that, and you can see it's rendering right here, and I'm just going to hit escape because we'll be able to see what the comparison is. You can see that now the two are the same. Okay, and then when you render this out and you go image save, this will be baked into your file. Okay, so you're basically baking in your color space with your file. So it's very important that you know this before you move forward, because a lot of you are going to get very frustrated if you don't know this, and you're going to wonder why things are happening. Okay, so this is how you resolve that. That's pretty much going to be it for this particular session. I really wanted to show you guys and tell you guys about how to set these things up to begin with, because it very much is a frustration for beginners with this render engine, because there are some assumptions that come with this render engine. It is a professional engine. It's one that, like I've said before, a lot of studios, whether they are boutique studios or large film studios in Hollywood or whatever, they use this, and a lot of them are sort of taught these things as you work with it, or you go to a school where they can teach you these things as well. So hopefully this helped you in understanding why you may have had some issues just kind of jumping into here and playing with some things and trying to do some test renders, and you see that stuff is really, really far off. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to the channel and get on the Discord if you have any questions or comments about this particular video. And I will see you guys next time on DJ Tutorials.